Good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder, and this is BRN AM for Tuesday, October 22nd, 2019. Here are our top stories. Planning to live on just Social Security? Here are some things you need to consider. And here are some more ways that you can keep your personal and financial information more secure. Well, it's Tech Tuesday, and that means we take a look at the intersection between technology and finance. And joining me from Orlando, Florida this week, Daniel Klein. He's a senior technology and consumer products reporter with the Motley Fool. Hi, Dan. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. It's National Retirement Security Week, as you are quite aware.
It's a vacation week for most people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Most people are not really thinking about retirement, unfortunately. We're going to try to change some of that, but I'm so glad you're able to join the show. And we're going to try to take the Tech Tuesday angle and dovetail it with retirement. So I know you wrote a piece this week on Social Security, which I think is absolutely fascinating. So why don't you talk a little about what the thesis was? We can go back and forth on that.
So I wrote what was meant to be a cautionary tale. I wrote a piece basically saying, can you live on Social Security alone? And the caveat to that is nobody should ever want to or plan to live on Social Security alone. The average individual gets about just a little under $1,500 a month. The average couple gets about $2,400. So I'm actually taping this show at our very modest vacation home in Orlando, or near Orlando, close to the Disney theme parks. And I looked at the cost of this house, and technically you could just barely get by on that $1,471 a month that the average person gets. But the point of writing the article, which I hope wasn't misconstrued, wasn't, all right, I'm going to live on Social Security, that'll be great, was just how incredibly hard it would be. And you would literally be making sacrifices in areas like healthcare. You'd have you'd have to choose between cable or internet service, and very, very tough. So kind of the point of my article is, I don't care if you're 55, I don't care if you're 30, you should be saving, because entering retirement with not enough savings is better than entering retirement with no savings. And if you're young, you can really, obviously maximize. And if you're older and you have some savings, well, then you can move to a place where the costs of housing are lower and you can sort of do more with less. So this was really for people who are in their 50s and sort of feel upset about where they are and almost want to throw in the towel and just say either I'll work forever or I'll retire and be, super poor. That if you can just set aside a little, you can give yourself a manageable life if you make the right decisions about where to live.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, so we had your colleague Mari Backman on several weeks ago, I think it was last week, talking about HSAs and FSAs, but we also had her on the podcast talking about Social Security and delaying Social Security. And even if you do that, I think your point is well taken, that you're still going to be behind the eight ball. We've got to get Americans saving. Many, unfortunately, are not in the best spot to do that. We know from yesterday's discussion with Devin Banerjee that working women by far earn less than working men, and women who are also moms and parenting also make some sacrifices there as well. So there's a lot of work to be done, I think you would agree, to get us to a point where people can actually set aside some dollars. And you're right, Social Security is not enough. And it was not meant to be the only source. I mean, you've got to have retirement savings, and Social Security and some other things.
Yeah, I mean, Social Security will replace roughly 40% of your income on average. So unless you're cutting your costs dramatically, and even on Medicaid, healthcare costs can be significant. So what you want to do when you're younger is sort of refocus on what you can afford. And, that might mean having a smaller house, driving an older car, not taking as many vacations. And I'm not a believer in the FIRE movement, the sacrifice everything, live in a tent so you can retire at 42. I think that's a little silly.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes people are taking a vacation as an indulgence when they should be buying a latte as an indulgence. So you really need to look at your budget, and even simple things. If you max out your 401k every year and there's an employer match, even if you're saving nothing else, well, if you started doing that at 21, you're going to have a pretty significant amount of money saved. One of the other things is if you're living in an expensive area and you buy a home, chances are over 30 or 40 years, the appreciation in your home is going to be significant. And if you come join us down here in Florida, well, it's going to be a lot cheaper. We lived in a $350,000 house in Connecticut and admittedly moved to a pretty similar condo in West Palm Beach. But if we had chosen to move to where I'm sitting in Orlando, we could have put, I don't know, $290,000 in the bank, something like that. So you want to make careful choices with what you spend and sort of know what your future is and what your assets are. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask you, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was going to ask you, you cover technology and consumer products for a living. And, you often talk about, you have the latest iPhone. But for those folks out there, how do you juggle? I was just looking at my telecom bill. We talked about that several weeks ago. How do you juggle some of these technology expenses and prioritizing that? I'm not just saying the Dan Klein family. I'm not necessarily picking on you, but I'm saying, how do Americans juggle what is important and keeping up with the Joneses or Smiths or whatever you want to call it in terms of the latest tech?
Yeah, so you need to manage what's important to you. Now, because of what I do for a living, I tend to have the latest technology. If I wasn't writing about the iPhone regularly, there's absolutely no way I would have the latest iPhone, because it makes sense to keep your iPhone for 3 or 4 years. Pay it off in 2, keep it a year or 2 belong that. Same logic on a car. If you get a 4-year car loan, keep your car for 6 years to the end of its usable lifespan, or keep it longer if you're not a heavy driver. But what you want to really do is look at all your expenses, and some things are non-negotiable. As a family, you probably all need smartphones. You probably need an internet connection in your house. Do you really need cable? Could you get by with Sling TV and Netflix and a couple of other things and save $80 or $90 a month? It's all a question of what's important to you. If you're not a big TV family and your kids like to watch YouTube, well, the $100 or $150 a month you're not spending, well, that might add up to $1,000 in savings and $600 in your vacation fund. So you need to make a budget and understand your finances. And it's okay. Look, for 8 years, I didn't take a vacation. Now I've done this show from 4 different cruise ships and 3 different vacation locations. So I'm lucky enough to have a job that's portable and enough money to save for retirement and also be able to be a little bit indulgent. You have to know where you are and what you can afford. And believe me, there are plenty of ways to have fun that are not significantly expensive.
Well, yeah, I think, and to your point, I think life ebbs and flows because we're all go through points in our lives where maybe we're down, we're up, we're down, we're up again. It's not a straight line. Do you think that a lot of Americans just in terms of making those choices need help with budgeting, the financial aspect of that? I mean, just setting aside and saying, okay, my cell phone is going to cost me $50 a month or whatever the number is. My Roku, my Sling TV is going to cost me X. My healthcare, which my employer is offering, is going to cost me Y. I mean, is that something that you think is readily needed?
So I think the average American struggles with delaying gratification for a long-term gain. So it's somewhat easier to say, I am not going to eat lunch out for the next 2 months because I have to go to my friend's wedding in Tacoma and that's going to cost me $1,000. That is sort of an attainable goal. It is much harder to say I'm going to save that same $1,000 every few months because 40 years from now I'm going to retire and need that money. Most people assume an irrational number of people assume they're going to get rich. That is why people who don't have money often vote for politicians who are going to change laws that favor the rich, not to get too political here, but the optimism over people's future finances doesn't bear out reality. And, as someone who turned 46 a couple of days ago, makes a nice living, I know I am never going to make $500,000 a year. That is not the career path I have taken. I also know that I'm probably never going to bottom out back what I made 10 years ago because I have marketable skills. There's a lot of demand for what I do, and
Right.
I set my budget accordingly. When my wife and I moved to Florida, we could have bought a $500,000 home in a resort community. I would very much like to own one of those. The reality is that would have stressed out the rest of our budget. It would have impacted our ability to travel. It would have made me have to think, hey, can I afford this when I go buy something? And the reality is, by living in a significantly cheaper home, we were able to say, you know what? If I need new jeans, I can go buy new jeans. I don't have to think about it. If my car needs new tires, which this week my car needed 2 front tires and a battery, that's just the cost of doing business. It wasn't even something I really had to budget for or think about. So, the idea is keep your base as low as possible. So that might mean a smaller home, a cheaper home, renting out your basement, who knows what it is, and focus on what's important to you. For me right now, travel is important. I have flexibility at work, so I want to be different places. So more of my money goes to that than goes to possessions. I'm not buying a lot of things. I'm spending money doing stuff. Maybe for you, having the biggest TV possible is really important. Whatever it is, figure out what you want and how you can get there while also setting money aside for the future. Do you have kids who are going to go to college? Are you saving for that? Are you telling your kids they have it on their own? What you don't want to be is retirement age and deciding, I have to hold off retirement until I'm 75 because if I retire, I'm going to have to live in a box and eat cat food. You want to see the long range picture. Look at where your parents are and figure out if they're in a good place or a bad place and what it would take you to either do the same or do differently.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are in the boat you just mentioned, although not cat food. And my cat is actually looking at me right now saying, did he just say take my cat food? But Dan, I'm going to go to commercial break. When we come back, we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about protecting your account. We did a little bit of that last week on our Cybersecurity Friday. When we come back, we'll be with Dan Klein. Stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. Welcome back. You know, you can never talk enough about protecting your personal and private information online. Dan Klein from the Motley Fool still with us. He really emptied his heart when it comes to saving and what we should all be doing in terms of budgeting. Really good insight there. Now we're going to shift gears. And, you know, last Friday we talked to a cybersecurity expert who told both employers and employees what they should be doing to protect their accounts financially and personal information. But we're going to check in with Dan as well, because I think Dan's got some really interesting insight, being that he is a senior technology and consumer products reporter and really also evaluates a lot of new technology. So, Dan, what can you add to this topic?
Well, So the first thing is I will call a low-tech solution. But all of your accounts, your bank accounts, your credit cards, your checking accounts, anything where sort of fraud could happen, you should have those accounts on your phone and check them at least once a week, if not
Hmm.
more often. And it's really a case of, if someone is draining $10 a day from your bank account, you may not notice on your statement because that's not actually that much money. But if you look at your daily transactions, you're like, wait a minute, I didn't spend $9.99 at whatever this place is. You want to be very active about it. It's really easy for people to get access to your credit card numbers to do, sort of small fraud. You will notice if somebody takes your credit card and buys a car. Your credit card company will notice as well, and you'll get a fraud alert. They may not notice if somebody steals your card and uses it to buy an ice cream every day. So you have to be very active in monitoring your account and question stuff. I've had scenarios where I've called my credit card company and said, hey, I don't recognize this charge because the name on the charge doesn't match the company I bought something from. And they come back and tell me, oh, that was for this and this. And I'll say, oh, yeah, I did do that. That charge is fine. Your credit card companies don't mind that. And the other thing is, if you're using your cards a lot, you might want to keep notes about what you're buying so you can make sure purchases match up. A transaction is sometimes logged immediately, and sometimes it takes half a day or a day to go through. So you have to be very active. And the second piece is, do not use lazy passwords. Your password should not be your child's name and a number 1. It should not be your birthday. It should not be anything a logical person can guess. And the reality is you should keep your password list offline in a hidden place. So I write down passwords on a piece of paper and keep them in a hidden part of my office. I'm not even going to say out loud where, in case one of the listeners or viewers here decides they want to break into my house. You will not find my passwords. So you need to be careful and you need to have common sense.
Let me ask you a question. Many of us, the internet's, started, well, I mean, it started many, many years ago, but it really became in popularity in the late 90s. And so many of us over time have established multiple email accounts, multiple banking accounts, credit card accounts, just general accounts on services like Mint and Personal Capital. Is there ever a point where it makes it easier to manage when you can consolidate and delete some of those extraneous accounts? That's one of the things that I do. I do take note of my transactions, and then I also enter it into a spreadsheet. But I'm also really on the far end of behavior when people do that. I'm very technical when it comes to that. But when it comes to some of these other accounts that maybe I don't use, are you seeing people just kind of consolidate down and saying, I don't need that anymore. I'm no longer a Comcast subscriber. I'm going to close that account completely.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's something I've done. In the past 2 years, I can say that I was never a big credit card person. I was always somebody who had a credit card for emergencies that had a bigger limit and a credit card for everyday things when you need to use a credit card, like say renting a car, that had a smaller limit. And in the past couple of years, I've gotten very surgical. So now I have an Apple card because I buy a new Mac every year for work. I buy a new iPhone. I have a travel rewards card. I have an American Express Platinum, which is a charge card which you have to pay every month because it has tremendous travel benefits. And as I added those cards, which is not great for your credit report in some ways to have new inquiries, but is better to have more available credit, it actually raised my credit score. I went through and did something you should not do on your own. You should not, without adding credit, close credit card accounts.
Yeah.
But as I added 3 or 4 very surgical, I'm going to use these credit cards for these reasons to maximize rewards, I went back and took a couple of accounts. I had a PayPal credit card account. And it was a very small limit, and I closed it because I don't use it. I pay, it's like $7 a month or something as a fee, and it made no sense, and it didn't really impact my overall credit. And when I got the new Apple credit card, I had the older Apple credit card. I went back and got rid of it. So overall, I made sure I had much higher available credit, but I got rid of a few things. The other thing I do, and some of the banks now have an app that will actually check these things for you, is I looked at my streaming services and what I was using and how I was paying for them, and I actually got rid of Hulu. I wasn't using Hulu. I was paying for it. Now, there's a caveat there because when Disney Plus launches, I will get the Disney Plus bundle, which includes Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, and Hulu. I don't really care about Hulu, but it's cheaper to get all three than to just get the two, and I will use Disney Plus and I will use ESPN Plus. But I took a very active look at what I was using and closed some things down. I would argue that most people who are, say, Netflix subscribers, if you're not using it every day, you should probably consider only having a subscription when there is a show you want to watch. So if there's something you're going to watch when it launches, get Netflix for a month, watch that show every night for 2 weeks, and then when you're done, if there's nothing else, cancel that subscription because these are at-will services. It's not cable. We have to commit for 2 years. I would look at shopping your insurance, shop your smartphone. Once or twice a year, look around and say, okay, can I do better? And in most cases, switching will save you money. And it's no longer particularly difficult to switch cell phone providers. Yeah. It's not at all difficult to switch insurance companies. So all of those things, and again, you can use brokers, there are other ways to do it, but everything you're spending money on, if you haven't looked at your mortgage in 3 or 4 years, rates are really low now. You should talk to a broker and see what you could save. And what you have to look at is what are the closing costs and will I be there long enough to recoup those? And if you can lower your costs, lower your costs.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dan, what I love about Tech Tuesday is it's not always Tech Tuesday. We talked about Social Security, we talked about mortgages, we talked about passwords, which is a little tech. Always enjoyable talking with you. Great personal finance and tech consumer product advice with you. Great to talk with you, and we'll talk to you again next week, my friend.
Next week, we're talking all NBA preview.
And folks, that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Hope you found it interesting and helpful. Hey, have a financial topic or someone of interest that you think we should interview? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the news in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, and so much more, check out today's edition of The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.